Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to you all. We're still waiting for a few more folks to join us, so we are going to start shortly. If you're able to mute yourself, that would be much appreciated. Ensure that we have good sound quality for today's session. And give folks a little bit more time to join us. Please do feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Welcome to those just joining us. We'll get started shortly. I am going to ask folks to mute themselves as you enter. And I think we can go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our third session in this series with Impala. My name is Kelton Artuso, and I'm the Associate Director of Programs here at Philanthropy Massachusetts. For those of you not familiar with our organization, we are a membership organization committed to the practice and expansion of effective and responsible philanthropy throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We do this by providing opportunities in learning, networking, access to resources and tools, and community building. And we strive to serve as the bridge between funders and fund applicants to better understanding, efficiency, and impact. We're glad to have you with us this afternoon as the Impala team walks us through how to utilize their platform for prospect research. During our previous two sessions, we've learned about how to claim your profile on Impala and how to put their ecosystem intelligence to work for your organization. If you weren't able to join us live for either of those sessions and are interested in learning about those topics, we'd be glad to share the recordings with you. So feel free to direct message us, the team at Philanthropy Mass, with your email address, and we can make sure you get those recordings. Philanthropy MA has been working with Impala since the early days of their platform, and we're excited to share the robust tool it has become with you today. As you may know, thanks to investments by the Barr Foundation and the Boston Foundation, nonprofits with a Massachusetts connection have complete access to the Impala platform for the next 2 years, free of charge. And all publicly available data will continue to be accessible beyond that time frame. I'll leave it to the Impala team to discuss their product more in depth, but before I turn things over, I want to quickly review some logistics. As always, we encourage you to share your questions, reactions, and reflections in the chat box throughout today's conversation. And there will be a dedicated time for questions and answers at the end of the session. Philanthropy Massachusetts seeks to create a welcoming, safe, and respectful space to enhance an open exchange of ideas. We are committed to fostering an environment of humility, exploration, and courage in our programming. To this end, we've created community guidelines for our programming, which can be reviewed by following the link in the chat, which hopefully one of my colleagues has shared with you. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please let us know in the chat box at any time. To access closed captioning, please click the caption button at the bottom of the screen and select Show Captions. We are making a recording of today's webinar and will distribute it to all our registrants afterwards. So with that spiel, I will turn it over to Danielle.
Thanks so much, Kelton. So happy to be here with all of you today. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Just a little bit about me before we get started. So for folks who don't know, for folks who haven't joined us yet on one of these sessions, my name is Danielle Belanger, and I'm a partnerships director here at Impala. And what that means is I get to have these lovely calls with all of you, with the community, to share about the Impala platform and what it can do to support your work. Prior to my time at Impala, I was at a philanthropic consulting firm based in Boston called GMA Foundations. And over my 10 years there, I got a chance to work with several foundations, both local and national, and really get to know their grantee partners, which is relevant to our conversation today, because as we walk through, that's the perspective I'll be talking through and talking from. So keep an eye out for those tips and tricks as we go through. So let's go ahead and jump into the agenda. So first and foremost, I know we have a lot of familiar faces on the call with us today, but for folks who are new, I want to do a quick rundown of what is Impala, just to level set for the conversation. Then the next thing we'll do is we'll demo the platform, and we'll show you how you can go about finding and evaluating funders across the platform to add to that strong prospect list. And there are a few different ways we can do that and a few different tools we can use, both profiles, ecosystems, and lists. And that'll make more sense in a second when I get going through the presentation. And lastly, as Kelton mentioned, we'll have some time at the end to discuss next steps and questions. I want to encourage you, as she mentioned, to feel free to drop questions into the chat. I'm joined by my colleague here today, Simon Dixon, who's watching that chat. So feel free to drop things in as I go, and he'll keep an eye on that and get them answered for you as we go through today. So let's go ahead and just get right going. First and foremost, Impala is a groundbreaking platform that's networking the social impact sector and democratizing data access. So really looking to get this data in the hands of folks who have not historically had access to it and making sure they know how to use it and act on it. So we do that by breaking down existing paywalls, allowing permanent free access to all existing 990 information. So we do that in two ways. The first is through profiles for every nonprofit and philanthropic foundation in the US. So this right now is close to 3 million profiles on the platform, and those are drawn from the 990s and are free and always free to search and browse at your heart's desire. And the other way we do it is through ecosystems, which is a way to analyze any nonprofit space, any sector, anywhere in the country. And so the profiles and search is free and always will be free. And the ecosystems is that premium feature that Kelton mentioned, that thanks to a partnership with Philanthropy Mass and support from the Barr Foundation and Boston Foundation, is free for all of you as nonprofits in Massachusetts for the next 24 months. So just thinking, before we jump into the platform, thinking about what are the things you might want to gather if you're going about this exercise yourself. So information that you might want to use to build a strong prospect list on the platform. So the first thing is to gather a list of your longtime supporters and funders. And this is something that you can use to identify folks that fund in common with those organizations who might then fund you. The next way we go about it is through thinking about a list of your organizations. I'm sure you all have that mental checklist of folks who do similar work to your nonprofit, so you can plug those in and see who's funding them, who might be a good prospect for you. The next thing to think about is cause areas and geography of your organization or its particular programs, thinking about what your work does and where they do it. And the last thing is to just think about any past or current prospect list you might have. I'm sure a lot of you have processes you do outside of the Impala platform right now. So bringing that into the platform, you can evaluate and assess those the outreach to those folks. So let's go ahead and actually check out Impala. I've done a lot of lead up to this. Let's go ahead and actually jump into the platform here. So we're starting out by going to impala.digital, and that's the home page. And then you can click the login button up here. And because my credentials are saved, we're already being brought into the platform right away. So as I mentioned, as I referenced earlier, we have the search and profiles feature, and that's what we're brought to here on this page, where we can search those nearly 3 million funders and nonprofits from across the US. For folks who are familiar with the Foundation Directory Online or GuideStar, this might feel like a similar tool, a similar function, but the key thing here is that this is free in one place and really actionable, ready for you to act on in your work. So For our purposes today, we'll run a search by organization, but I just want to flag here the advanced search features that you can do. There are a number of different criteria that you can run to refine a search, but I'll just flag the geographies here. So if you wanted to look, say, around Massachusetts, you could fill that in. Any city, state, or county is possible. Then you could also plug in causes. So I'll click in here so you can see this list. This is drawn from the IRS's list of NTEE codes that everyone plugs in on 990. And if you want to drill down into a subcategory, you can click the little caret along the left and select whichever one is most relevant to your interests. And once you've done that, you would just click apply filters, and then the search results would update based on what you've plugged in. For our purposes, I'm going to start here with an organization search for a nonprofit. And that nonprofit is this organization called Root, and they are based in Salem. And they do food aid work. And so as we're going through today, the exercise I'm going to be running is from the perspective of a peer organization to Root. Let's say I do food aid work, and I'm trying to fundraise for at least $5,000 to $10,000 for a new program I'm starting up. So as we run through this exercise, the things I'm going to be thinking about and flagging for you are alignment. So understanding if the funders I'm highlighting support food aid, and capacity to give. So seeing if a funder can give at least that $5,000 to $10,000 range that I've set as my threshold. So I'll flag places throughout the platform that you'll be able to see and identify those. So we're brought here to a nonprofit profile, and this is the structure of any nonprofit profile on the platform. It will have this nice header section up at the top, and then 3 sections here: impact, people, and financials. And we'll start with the financial section here to highlight a few places you could come to see potential funders to support your work. So we see right off the bat some high-level financial information about the organization, but what I think is most relevant to our exercise today is this funders change graph here. So what this is telling us is who are the funders who have newly started or stopped supporting this organization each year. So if we're doing food aid work like this organization does, we can click in and see who those 8 organizations are who are supporting this organization newly. So they've newly started supporting the sector perhaps, and I can see who they are and how much they gave. So we can see right off the bat, the Boston Foundation has given $57,000. So that's well within my desired grant amount. So I can actually go ahead and add them to my list. And we'll get into the list features in a little bit, but this is a place to gather your thoughts and interests as you run through the platform and not get interrupted in your flow. So you can see here, I've already started a food aid funder prospects list. So I'm going to go ahead and add them to that list and then continue about on my journey. We could run that exercise for all of these 8 funders, but for purposes today, I'm going to keep moving us along. So we can also scroll through and see some really nice, robust visuals, but I won't go into all of those today. The other relevant piece here on this page is this funder summary chart. So this is an aggregated list of all of the funding that has gone to this organization that I consider a peer organization. So this is the list of folks who very well could support my organization because they've given to this organization as well. And we can see here the organization name, how much was given. And the key thing I think here that's nice to look at is the number of grants that they've given. So we can see if they've been a long-term funder of this particular organization, and we could actually sort by that column as well if we wanted to do that. So if we saw any organizations on this list that seemed like they might be a fit for us in terms of they've given to food aid and they're giving out an amount that I want, we could go ahead and add those here. So we see the Boston Foundation that we already added just a second ago. And but we see this other foundation here that has given $10,000. And so they might be a good fit for us. We could go ahead and add them to the list as well. I've already built the list from a previous exercise. So you'll see throughout the day today that I won't necessarily keep clicking that add to list pop up for us. So back up to the top, we have a couple more sections to run through. We have this people section here, which I won't go too deep into, other than to just say we know relationships are important in philanthropy. So this is the place where you can come and see all of the folks who are affiliated with this nonprofit, executives, board members, and staff, and see when they've served, what role they served in. So you could come here and search for folks if you're wanting to find a connection. The last section here on the nonprofit profile is this impact section. And this is My favorite spot in particular, because all that other stuff is drawn from the 990, this is where folks get to like tell their true story in their own words. So we can see right off the bat, we saw those cause areas earlier in the advanced search function. This is one of the places where it draws from. So we see that this organization serves in 3 different cause areas. If they wanted to add more, they could click this pencil icon and select from that list. And this is one of the ways they will be found on the platform. The other piece here to add some detail is around populations. And so this is their way to share with folks what kind of work they do, who they work with, what communities they serve. So this impact page, if you're trying to evaluate a nonprofit as a peer, this is where you would come to understand better how they think about themselves. They've included some details about their successes as an organization here in the key impact metrics section. And what comes out to me as a food aid, if I'm a food aid organization, I can see here they have served 2,000 community meals per month. So they're definitely doing work with like the type of work that I want to be doing as well. And last but not least, we can see some additional color on this organization based on the programs they've added to their profile. And I can see right away down here, this program down here, it has 3 different cause areas related, one of which is food aid. So again, underscoring for me that this is a good fit as a peer organization to use as I'm doing my funding research. So this is a nonprofit profile. All of the information in the financials and people section that we saw is drawn from 990s. So we encourage folks to go ahead and add 990s to their profile. If they come in and see that the latest one is not there, you just click the plus sign here. You click upload file, and then we take it from there. But you don't have to do any manual data entry or anything. We will scrape the data and update your profile for you. So let's switch gears now and take a look at a funder profile, because that's, part of your process is going to be evaluating these funders that you're coming up with on the platform. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Foundation for Metro West and see what their profile can tell us. So let's go ahead into their profile, and we can see it has a very similar feel as the nonprofit profile. It has this nice header section up at the top. It has the same 3 sections, impact, people, and financials, but it has these 2 new sections here, funding and funding overlap. So those are the ones we will focus on right now, but these first 3 are very much the same to what we just saw on the other profile. Let's go ahead and look at the funding section. So this is a section that you might come to if you're trying to evaluate a funder and prioritize them in your prospect list. So you can come see some nice headline data here at the top about how much they've given and their average, average giving. Well, the one thing I want to mention here is this multi-year grantees number. So this is telling you a little bit of a snapshot about the type of relationship you might have with this organization if you get in as a grantee of this foundation. So nearly just over 50% of their grantees receive multiple years of support from them. So getting your foot in the door might be beneficial in the long run. The other piece of information I just want to flag here that's relevant in terms of qualifying this foundation as a prospect is this median grants information here. So we know, if they're new to you, you might not know what their typical grant amount is or what to ask as a reasonable request amount. So we can see here that they're at the baseline, their median first year grant amount is $10,000. And for me, as that food aid funder, funding for at least $5,000 to $10,000, that checks the box for me in terms of their giving capacity. So this would make a mental note and say, hey, they meet that criteria for me as a fundraiser. I want to scroll down here because we have some really helpful visuals in this section. So building on that multi-year grantees number we saw up here, we have this really nice visual to see the number of years in portfolio. So this is visualizing the longevity of the relationship that this funder has with nonprofits. So it gives you an understanding of what type of support you might receive beyond that first year of giving to evaluate if it's worth pursuing this funder. The other place to take a look at here is this nonprofits change graph on the left. And this is telling us the number of new nonprofits and organizations started supporting and those that they stopped supporting each year. So we can see here some nice variation in the portfolio, which signals to us that they are open to supporting new organizations and not just supporting, the same 10 nonprofits year after year. So another place to come and understand if it's someone who might be receptive to your application. Let's take a look at these last few visuals down here. So there's grants by year, grants by size, and then these grants charts down below. All of these interact with each other. So again, as a reminder, we're looking at $5,000 to $10,000 grants at a minimum. We can select that grants by size on this chart, and we can see that the graph on the left updated, as well as this grants given chart below. So what we could do here is take a look at this list of grants given and see, do we see organizations like us? Do we see food aid organizations on this list who've gotten $5,000 to $10,000? And we actually do. Here's FoodLink. So this is a nice signal to us that folks who have received these $5,000 to $10,000 grants do work like me. So this is another indicator about potential alignment with this funder. You could also click in and see this grantee summary here, which gives you another visualization of that longevity of relationship that we talked about earlier in terms of who receives support, how much, and how many over how many grants. So that's another way to see that chart we saw up above. So this is one place you can come to kind of help prioritize if a funder is worth pursuing or kind of where to put them on your list. This funding overlap section is from the hat of, let's say this foundation is already our supporter, who funds in common with them, who has given to the same nonprofits in the same year. So we can use this as a tool to understand who else might support our organization. So we can see here that the Liberty Mutual Foundation and the Foundation for Metro West have funded 26 nonprofits in common. So we could come here and see who those 26 organizations are and see if we see ourselves anywhere on this list in terms of food aid organizations, and see how much Liberty Mutual gave to those organizations to understand if that capacity matches with our needs. And if we decide that we think they do, that they align with that food aid work, we could go ahead and add them to the list and then continue on our way in the process. So this is a place to come and kind of test out the waters with other funders who already support your work to see who overlaps with them in their giving. So I know we just covered a lot. We covered search and the profiles for both a funder and nonprofit. Bear with me a second. I'm going to jump into that list tool, which is relevant to our conversation today. So this is the place where you can kind of parking lot any items you come across on the platform that might be of interest to pursue. So this is where you can actually build that prospect list. So you can see here, we started that funder prospect list here. We can actually click in and see who are all of the foundations that we've added to this list already and see particular details about those organizations. So for example, we get that nice median grant number here as a way to qualify this funder as a potential supporter of ours. So a couple things to note here. This is a collaborative tool. So if you want to work on this list development with other colleagues, you can click the share button here. You could share it with your entire team on Impala, or let's say I just want to collaborate with my colleague Dan. I could just check that there, confirm, and then he will get a message telling him I want to work with him on this list. The other piece I want to flag here is that once he's in, we can go ahead and exchange comments back and forth with each other if we have particular ideas about any of the funders on this list. And the last thing I want to just mention real quick in terms of how to act on this list is clicking here into these dots. If you have a process already, you already like to use Excel in a certain fashion or spreadsheets, you can export this to a spreadsheet and continue on your usual process in that fashion. So we want to be able to make it fit in your workflow, whatever works best for you. Take a quick note of this define ecosystem button because we'll come back to that later. But for now, I want to transition us into ecosystems, which is really the robust tool that I think you all will be able to use heavily in your work. So let's go ahead and take a look at ecosystems. While I do that, I just want to mention everything up until now you've seen. So the lists and the search is totally free and always will be free for you. So this ecosystems that we've transitioned to now is free and available to you for the next 2 years, thanks to that support we mentioned earlier. And an ecosystem is simply an aggregation of all that profile data we saw earlier. So we think about it in 3 different frameworks. The first is through landscape markers. So this is based on cause area and geography. So let's say I want to look at food aid work in Massachusetts and see who funds that work. That's a great place to go and identify new funders. we can go to this funders option here, and that's a place where you can simply plug in that smart prospect list and evaluate it based on a number of different criteria in the platform. And the last is this nonprofit section here. So you might remember I mentioned earlier, think about putting together a list of those peer nonprofits. You can plug that in here and see who funds those organizations, but who doesn't yet fund you, to identify new potential folks to support your work. So we'll run through each of these in some fashion today, but let's go ahead and start with landscape markers to get us going. So just sticking with the theme, I'm going to go ahead and plug in Massachusetts. You could select any geography here, city, state, or county, and any combination thereof. Let's say I wanted to look at all of New England, I can plug in all of those states here. And similarly on causes, we have that nice list that we've seen consistently throughout the platform, and we could pick from any of the things on this list, but for our purposes, I'm going to just do food aid. And we'll go ahead and select food aid from the list, which is a subcategory of human services. But again, if we saw multiple causes that we were curious about, we could go ahead and add those here as well. It's really nimble and flexible, customizable to whatever you're curious about understanding. We have some advanced criteria here that I just want to flag. There's a variety of different things you can fiddle with, but in particular, we have this option to include or exclude grants through donor advised funds. So we know that from conversations with folks, that this data tends to kind of be a bit of a black box and hard to kind of act on. So we created this ability to exclude those grants to just have a cleaner picture of what we're looking at. So we can see based on these criteria, we have over 300 nonprofits and over 1,100 funders who support food aid in Massachusetts. Let's go ahead and see this actual ecosystem in real time. So this is the dashboard for any ecosystem. It's going to look like this no matter which of the three frameworks you use. And it will be sorted by both funding and the nonprofit section like we see here. So we can see there's almost $230 million in funding going to food aid across the state. And that's being given by those 1,100 funders across 5,400 grants to those 312 nonprofits. So this is a nice big picture understanding of the ecosystem, so you can think about what's going on in the space. But for our purposes today, we'll really focus on this funding section here along the left as the place to go to help build that prospect list. So this menu will be the same across, again, all those the frameworks that we looked at earlier. And let's go ahead and jump into the summary section here. So the summary section is going to carry over some of that same data we just saw on the dashboard, but just a couple places I want to flag here for you. So we can see in general, it's an upward growing sector, but the piece that is of interest to our purposes today is this funder change graph. So we saw this on the profile level. We saw those for that organization. This is on the ecosystem level. How many funders have started supporting food aid in Massachusetts? So we can actually click in here, see who these 244 new organizations are, and we could actually sort by any of these categories here. So if we wanted to sort by average grant size, or we wanted to sort by number of grants they've contributed to the ecosystem, we could do that. So if we see one on here that we say, oh, hey, the Adelson Family Foundation, they've given $35,000 average grant size. That's well, within the amount I'm looking for, and they're supporting this work. So I want to go ahead and add them to my list. I can click add to list and continue about on my journey. So you could do that for this whole list of 244 funders and slice and dice and sort however you want to understand and compare across them. So that's a place to start when you're trying to build a strong prospect list, is to come and see the ecosystem funder change data. Let's take a look diving into this grant distribution section here. So again, this might feel similar to what we saw in the profile, but it's again an ecosystem level look at the grants by year and the grants by size, and then all of the individual grants. So again, keeping in mind, we're looking for $5,000 to $10,000 at least. We can click in here and we can see both this list at the left updated as well as the list down below. So we are seeing right now just those 927 grants that fall into that dollar amount size. So we already know those fit within the giving capacity that we're looking for. What we're trying to understand is, do we see any of our peers on this list? And so first and foremost, we do, right? We can see here Community Servings. They're a food aid based organization in the Boston area, and they got almost a $10,000 grant from this foundation. So this is another foundation I definitely want to add to my list and explore further in a minute. So this is a place to come to see every individual grant, and you can filter this data down below by interacting with these graphs up here, and in particular around the grants by size, to make sure you're getting a picture about the grant size that you are interested in requesting. So let's go ahead and jump into the comparison section here. And this is just like what it sounds. It's the place to compare across all of the funders who support food aid in Massachusetts. So we'll be able to see, data about every funder who supports this work. So if you have nowhere else, if you have very limited time and you're trying to build that prospect list, build an ecosystem and come to this comparisons table, because this is all of the funders who support that work. So you can use this chart to add to your Smart Prospect list and qualify them based on these data points that you're seeing here. So again, we see a couple of folks that we are familiar with, having done some other research. So we know the Boston Foundation's on here. And we can see, for example, that they give $800 million in total funding, of which nearly 26 million has gone to supporting food aid work in Massachusetts. And that's 3% of their giving. And so what that means is that their ecosystem, they are aligned with this ecosystem at this degree. So this is a data point you could use to sort this whole table and help understand who really aligns with this cause area and this ecosystem and who doesn't, to help qualify who you add to your prospect list. And the last thing I just want to mention here is this grantee change number on the right. So we can see for the Boston Foundation, for example, they had 20 new nonprofits in food aid that they started supporting. So they're actively supporting this work, and they are again accepting support to new organizations. So we could use that as another metric as well and sort by that category on this table here. So this is another place you could come and browse all these 1,100 funders, sort by any category that might be of interest to qualify and get a best fit for that prospect list that you're building on the platform. And if at any point you see one you're interested in adding, you can simply hover over and click add to list so you don't lose them, and you can come back and revisit them later. The last thing I want to jump into is this overlap section here, which is the funding overlap but on an ecosystem level. So again, we looked at overlap on the profile, and that meant any two funders who funded the same nonprofit in the same year. So it's running this on an ecosystem level. So as we can see, it's got 38,000 pairs that it's trying to pull up data for us here. So what we can come and see is folks who really have alignment in this space and understand, who they have in common. So I could click in here and see, for example, United Way and Massachusetts Bay and Boston Foundation. They have funded 15 nonprofits in common for over $14 million. So I could browse this list and see if I see any of my peer organizations on here. So we, for example, can see Family Aid Boston and Middlesex Human Service Agency. They've both gotten a significant amount of money from both United Way and Boston Foundation. So if they weren't already on my list, I could go ahead and add United Way of Mass Bay to my list, scroll down to that list here, and go ahead and confirm. So this overlap section is another place to identify folks who fund peer organizations and to help identify alignment with your cause area. So we just ran through what we called a landscape marker search as an initial pass at identifying funders to support our food aid work in Massachusetts. I'm going to go about another way of creating an ecosystem, and that's through the list that I flagged earlier. So you might have noticed when we were in here earlier, I have created a list of my food aid peers. So these are nonprofits who have decided to also do food aid work, and their work aligns closely enough with what I do to be a parallel type organization. So I've got 26 of those on this list, and I can just click these three dots over here and go ahead and define that ecosystem right from this page. And because this is nonprofits, that's the framework I want to use. I can click nonprofits here, and we'll be brought into this screen. Now, if we want to add some additional filters like removing the DAF grants, we could do that as well by clicking this edit filters button on the right. But we can see already right off the bat, 26 nonprofits, these 26 peer nonprofits of mine have support from just over 600 funders. So I have another pool of 600 funders to draw from and evaluate to add to my prospect list. So let's go ahead and jump into I won't run through the whole exercise again, but jump into a couple places as key reminders of where to look when you're navigating this ecosystem. So let's go ahead and jump into the summary page. So as a reminder, these 26 organizations are my peers. So they already share, that cause area, that alignment is in common. So we can come in here and see who are all of the funders who newly started supporting these 26 organizations. And we could actually click in and see who those are. And again, do the similar evaluation process we did in terms of we could sort by grant size to, again, evaluate based on their giving capacity or number of new grants as a way to make sure that they are perhaps going to be receptive to my application as a new organization to them. So you could run that exercise for all of these 138 funders. And again, anywhere you see it, you can go ahead and add them to the list to folks that you want to pursue further. The other place I want to just mention, I think that is relevant, is this grant distribution section here. So again, this is a way to narrow down this list of funders and grants based on a dollar amount. So again, with that $5,000 to $10,000 framework in mind, we can now see this whole list of folks who have given to organizations, my peer organizations, in the dollar amount range that I'm looking for. So I can check both boxes in terms of the giving amount and the alignment in terms of cause area here. So we can see already some nice fits here. This foundation supported community servings, we saw them earlier. And this organization as well also supported Greater Boston Food Bank at a dollar amount well within the range that I selected. So this is another place to come to evaluate based on your peers. So you already checked that box of alignment, what the dollar amount capacity is of some of these funders. I'm going to go ahead and jump into the comparison table here, and then we'll wrap up with some kind of evaluation metric approaches that we can use. So this is a comparison of all of the funders who have given to these 26 peer nonprofits that I selected. And of course, the more organizations you select as peers, the more robust this list of funders are going to be. But even with 26, we have those nearly 600 funders to work from. So right off the bat, we can see, again, some nice comparison data. And if we wanted to sort by grantee change, we could do that as a way to reveal new organizations to us who are newly active in this space and are willing to support organizations like me who might not be a grantee of theirs as of yet. So it's working hard, of course, to sort those 600, but we can see we get a slightly different view into this ecosystem based on resorting it in that fashion. And we can see, again, some things like ecosystem focus that are good indicators for us when evaluating whether or not to add somebody to that prospect list. So I'm going to stop there. I'm not going to jump into overlap because we've reviewed that now a couple times. What I want to do now is show you kind of how we act on that list that we just built across the platform. So let's go back into the list tool here up at the top. And we can see here the funder prospects list that I've added recently and I had added to prior to our conversation today. And so we could click in and see some details. For example, we could see that median grant number that's really nice and rich to help us qualify these funders. But more importantly, we can go ahead and define an ecosystem based on this list of 14 funders. And again, because this is funders, that's the framework we select here. And then the key place to go on the platform will be, I hope no surprise, that will be the comparison section along the left. But first, I want to mention a couple things about the filters that we can do with a funder-based ecosystem. So I clicked into the edit filters, and this is showing us the list of all the funders that I had added as potential prospects. And right off the bat, you'll notice the second level of connectivity option. This is a bit of an extension of that overlap conversation we were having earlier, but it lets you see which funders also support the same nonprofits, not just limited to the same year over time. And so you can see a broader picture of folks who have shared nonprofits in their history. So that would create a really unwieldy profile, a really unwieldy ecosystem to look at thousands. So we'll go ahead and toggle that off so we can just focus on the 14 that we've identified as those strong prospects. And then we can go ahead and see some advanced criteria if we wanted to go ahead and select Massachusetts and select food aid. We could look at just these funders through that lens as well. So we can slice and dice this data however we want to look at it and whatever way we want to refine it. So we can see here that that leaves us with the 14 funders we started with, and they fund almost 100 nonprofits together. So we can go ahead and save these changes here. And now we have a cleaner picture of what we want to look at in terms of what are these 14 funders all about, how much have they given, and who have they supported. So we'll not go through the whole funding section here, but what we will do is go into that comparison chart just as a reminder of where you might want to evaluate these 14 funders now that you've narrowed down your list of prospects. So we can see here some headline data about the funders. So the Boston Foundation takes the headlines here at the top in terms of how much they've given and how many grants they've given to support those organizations in the ecosystem. Let's just give the system a second to catch up with us because I'm talking faster than the system can handle. But this is the place as a reminder where we saw all the funders for every ecosystem that we were looking at. So we can see here, we have the Boston Foundation at the top, but we could again sort by any of these categories and evaluate them based on their commitment to this kind of work. And in particular, understanding that grantee change number, which is such a nice, strong indicator of whether or not they might be worth adding to the top of my list, bumping up on my list. So we can see here, this reveals some nice information about our list. So we can qualify and understand how we might prioritize these organizations based on their likelihood to support a new organization and their commitment to this kind of work. So once you've created a prospect list, you can simply go from the list tool into this ecosystem as a way to evaluate it and then do the next step of that outreach and application process. So I know we have covered a lot and I apologize for feeling probably like a fire hose, but I really hope it has been helpful in understanding the different places that you can plug into the platform to find those strong prospects to add to your list on Impala. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my slides and we'll wrap up for today in a minute. There we go. So I hope you're excited to get going. And you're probably wondering, if you aren't already on Impala, what do I do now? What happens next? So first and foremost, if you haven't gotten on the platform yet, you will expect to receive an email today from support@impala.digital to get on board the platform. And that'll be a really quick process. And once you've gotten that email, if you're a foundation or nonprofit staff person, you can go ahead and claim your organization. And that's important for two reasons. The first is it lets you see things through the lens of your organization across the platform. And the other is that it lets you edit your profile. So make sure folks find you where they should on the platform with those cause areas and other things that we looked at. And that's a really quick process. It only takes 2 minutes to get going on the platform. And once you've done that, you're ready to explore the profiles and ecosystems across the platform. And as a reminder, everything we looked at today is free for you as a Massachusetts nonprofit. And if at any point you have any questions, either challenges with the registration process or just in general about what we talked about, or as you're exploring the platform, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at support@impala.digital. There's a team of 5 of us who monitor that inbox and make sure that somebody gets back to you with a helpful answer as soon as possible. So with that, I want to jump into the FAQs and then open it up for Q&A. I won't run through all of these because I don't need to read them at you, but the one that I think is probably most relevant to our conversation today is around ecosystems. So as you might remember, the ecosystems tool is free for you for 2 years, thanks to support from the Boston and Bar Foundations. But you might be wondering, okay, what happens after those 2 years? So a couple options. The first is that you can maintain access to that ecosystems tool by paying a low monthly fee. Now, to be transparent, we have not yet set that fee because that 2 years is far away. We are actively working on coming up with a number that will not be a barrier to entry. As I mentioned at the top of the call, we really want to ensure folks have access to this tool if they need it to support their work. So that will be coming down the pipeline, but I promise, we promise you won't wake up in 2 years with a big surprise bill in your inbox. The other option, of course, is to return to Impala's free robust version, which is those search and profiles with intel on every grant given and received, and that really interesting funding overlap data that we looked at the top of the call. So with that, I'm going to open it up for a Q&A, and I'll certainly tag in Simon if you've had any questions that have come up that we might want to give voice to as a group.
Thanks, Danielle. I might just start by going through a couple of questions that typically come up. So one of the most common questions is there a limit to the number of users we can have on Impala? And the simple answer to that is no. So you can have one person on the platform, you can have 100, you can have 1,000. If you'd like everyone in your organization to have a login, or perhaps you'd like your board members to also have a login, then that's very much possible as well. And you can set their level of access. So for example, you may just want your board members to have viewer access, not admin access, so that they can't edit your profile. That's completely possible as well. And then another question that was coming up earlier was to do with RFPs. And I think just stepping back, it's always good to sort of note, so roughly the data shows that only about 1% of foundation funding actually goes through the RFP process. So that leaves a whole 99%, huge amounts of money that are coming from organic applications to funders. And I think that's really where the value of Impala is. It's a place to look for potential funders, to see those that are aligned with you, and then reach out to them directly. So certainly while we are working on having RFP information, potential grants information on the website, I think a lot of the gain here is to be had by reaching out to those organizations directly. It looks like we have another question, a great question from Andy. So she said, I volunteer with a couple California-based organizations. Is there any way for them to have access to the premium version? Andy, I mean, look, what we really care about most is making sure that people have access to the platform. Now, this specific deal with Philanthropy Massachusetts covers Massachusetts-based organizations, Massachusetts-based funders, but also all of those funders' grantees. So I'd say just reach out to us directly. Let's take a look at the organizations. We might be able to find a way around it, basically. If they are a grantee of a Massachusetts funder, then we could probably find a way to loop them in. But reach out to us and we'll find a way to make it work. Oh, Victoria, another great question. So this is about whether funders accept solicited or unsolicited proposals. And this is something that actually funders can signal on their Form 990. Our team literally had a meeting about this morning, and I think pretty soon we're actually going to allow, one, for this information to be shown on their profile, and two, for you to be able to filter through it. So you'll be able to turn on and just see in your results those organizations that only accept solicited proposals or unsolicited proposals, if that's of interest to you. While we're just waiting, if anyone has any other questions, feel free to drop them in. I might also just jump on something Danielle said earlier. So a question that always comes up as well is, wow, this is really cool, but what happens at the end of the 2 years? And I think the key thing here is there's no nasty surprises. So we're not looking to, you're not going to get a big bill in the mail at the end of this. What we do know for sure, and we're still, frankly, we've only had the platform open for a couple of months, so we're still figuring things out. But what we do know is that number one, it will be affordable and it will be less than getting a Guide Star and Foundation Directory Online membership. But number two, we don't want this, as Danielle said, to be a barrier. So we're not here to gouge nonprofits. They have more important things to spend their time and their money on. And so we'll also have discounts based on the size of the organization and their assets. Obviously, a small organization shouldn't be paying the same fees as a huge university.
Simon, I'm wondering if you already addressed this. Ellen has a question about working as a consultant. If she works with multiple organizations, how does she handle that?
Oh, thanks. That's a terrific question. Yes, so we have already hundreds of consultants using the platform, and obviously consultants have a lot of organizations they work with. So we've just released a feature where you can have access to multiple organizations' profiles. So first of all, reach out to us and we'll make sure that you get on the platform. But also, if you want to have access to your clients' profiles, then we can certainly set that up as well. You can help them to set them up, but it also means that when you switch or toggle between those profiles, you're seeing the world on Impala through their eyes. So you get to see how they rank in different ecosystems, how they compare, who they're connected to, and all those sorts of things as well.
And Kathy asks if we need individual help developing a prospect list, who do we contact?
We'll definitely reach out to support@impala.digital, and perhaps Daniel will just drop that email again in the chat. Reach out to us. We can always give you a hand. Apart from being a team that works on a tech platform, a lot of our team also came from the nonprofit and the philanthropic sectors. So some experience there to mine, and we can certainly give you a hand.
I see a couple more questions coming in. So the first one from Toby, do you envision sharing data on what users search for with the funding community such that it may inform them on nonprofit org needs? I love this because we've been having a conversation about this internally about having kind of, what are the trending searches or what are the trending keywords that folks are looking for. So we've definitely been having that conversation. I'd say we'll bring it back up to the team now that we've heard from you all that that's a curiosity. For now, not, but it is a great way to perhaps raise up those issues that are important to the sector at any given moment. So thank you for asking that question, Toby.
Yeah, something just jumping on that, Danielle. So when you build an ecosystem, you can also save that ecosystem. Now, when you save it, it's internal facing only. But something we've been thinking about is the ability to sort of our team to push out shared resources and shared ecosystems. So, for example, when something like the Ukraine crisis arrives, we can push out an ecosystem and make it public to all the users. So you can see, for example, or say the Turkey earthquake, all those organizations that are supporting people in Turkey or helping with that. So we're not quite there yet, but that's along a similar lines of the kinds of things we're looking at. And just jumping off that, Victoria asked a question, there's a lot of information here. Is there a manual? So I've just dropped in the chat our help desk. And so you can certainly go there. That's got a bunch of articles to help you step through getting started, setting up. And we're actually very, very shortly releasing videos. So what will be great is you'll be on different parts of the platform, and then you'll be able to see a short 1 or 2 minute video showing you how to use that particular part of the platform. So stay tuned for that as well. And if there's a particular part or, section that you want some help on, just email us and we can probably flick you one of those videos before it's publicly released.
I think we've maybe exhausted our questions. I welcome folks to plug in any questions they have in the chat, or if not, as we mentioned a couple of times now, feel free to reach out to us at support@impala.digital. If you think of things, later today that you're like, oh, I wish I asked that, don't hesitate to reach out. We're here, and we can get back to you on that. And with that, I want to pass it back to Kelton and the PMA folks, and thank us again for everyone for being here with us today.
I will jump on that thanks bandwagon and say thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Simon, for joining us and walking us through the use of this platform. I've been playing with it for a while and I'm learning new things. So I'm appreciative of all that you guys are doing. As I mentioned at the beginning, we do have the recordings from the earlier sessions. If that's of interest to folks, happy to share those. And you will be receiving the recording from today's session. It's been a pleasure. If there's other aspects of the Impala system that you're curious about, please don't hesitate to let us know at Philanthropy Mass, and maybe we can revive this series for future parts, depending on availability. But this has been a pleasure sharing this hour with you all. And I hope to see you at future programs. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.